Hi there. In this video, I will show you 6 different whipped stitches. The whippings are often done over basic stitches to create an attractive variation of the stitch. Many times, it totally changes the look of the base stitch. The first one is the running stitch. This stitch is easy to do and takes lesser time to finish. Whipping the running stitch covers the gaps, giving it a continuous appearance. Always whip in the same direction. I prefer the right to left direction. And be careful not to plug the fabric under each stitch. To give the stitch an elongated or crunched look, vary the lengths of the running stitch and the gaps between the stitches. This stitch is great for lettering, outlines, and adding color and decoration if the running stitch is used on edges and as visible seams. The next one is the whipped back stitch. Each stitch is about ½ centimeters. I'm using all the 6 strands for both the base stitch and the whipping. The back stitch does not create gaps like the running stitch, but can make prominent stitch points. Whipping around the back stitch covers these stitch points and gives more height to the stitch. This is an excellent one for lettering and for outlines. Try whipping with the same color and see if you like the effect. Compare the whipped running stitch and the whipped back stitch. See how different they look? The third one is the whipped stem stitch. I'm working it from the top to the bottom. The stem stitch is a bit thicker than the back stitch as the stitches layer each other. When I start whipping, I go under these layered stitches. So I go under 2 stitches each time. This brings the 2 layers closer, giving the stitch a slimmer and taller appearance. If you compare it with the earlier whipped back stitch, it is only different in volume. This is an excellent stitch. This is an awesome stitch for lettering, outlines, and where you want to combine 2 colors with some embossed texture. The fourth one is the whipped chain stitch. The chain stitch is more voluminous than the earlier stitches that we have used so far, as each chain is made of a loop and not a single straight stitch. My loop is ½ centimeters in length as I try to give it a fair comparison with the others. Whip by passing the thread under each loop in the chain stitch. You see that the chain is gathering to itself, slimming out and creating more height instead. It is a stitch with some bulk. Let me say that it is the most embossed stitch we have done so far. I would love to use the stitch on lettering and maybe to create some raised texture. The fifth one is a bit different, the whipped blanket stitch. I find the stitch wonderful and very decorative when you use it on the edges of the fabric. The whipping provides a sort of an excellent addition and finishing to the edges. Of course, you can also find other creative applications of the stitch in surface embroidery. The sixth one is the whipped fly stitch. What I like about this stitch is something similar to the whip back stitch. Whipping around the fly stitch hides the stitch points, giving it a more seamless appearance. When applied on borders and for framing purposes, I find it a highly decorative stitch. The twisted spine looks beautiful. This is what the reverse looks like. The whipped fly stitch, the whipped running stitch, the whipped back stitch, the whipped stem stitch, the whipped chain stitch, and the whipped blanket stitch. If you see, the whipped thread does not show on the back as it never passes through the fabric. Let us have a look at the whipped stitches one more time. They're lovely. I hope you can now appreciate the difference whipping can make to a stitch. I really enjoyed making this video for you. Drop me your comments. Thank you for watching.